Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. My name is Kit. I'm Vice President of AIM, Association of Asian American Investment Managers. I've got my colleague Andrew Bay on the line with me today. So if you haven't gotten a chance to welcome him to the team, feel free to give him a hello in the chat. We're really excited to present today's event with you all. I am thrilled to see everybody who's in attendance. I know I saw all of our Employee Resource Group Steering Committee and lots of leads at our various employee resource group firms in our network. So thank you so much. A little bit about just kind of the format of today. So we're going to have a fireside chat with Nita and Borden, and I'll introduce them in a minute here. And then afterwards, we're going to have time for some Q&A. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our moderator today. So Borden Lai, thank you so much for being our moderator today. And thank you so much for sponsoring this event, Beach Point Capital. Beach Point has been a sponsor for the ERG Network for the past 2 years now. We're really excited for their support. So a little bit about Borden. Borden is a managing director at Beach Point Capital Management, and Beach Point is a multi-strategy investment manager with 16 billion AUM. He's focused on PE investments and middle market companies, and he's been in the industry since 2002, even though he doesn't look like it. He was previously at Quilvest Private Equity, a global multifamily office with 5 billion AUM. And prior to Quilvest, he worked at Pegasus Capital and Vision Capital, where he invested under a flexible mandate and opportunistic investments in middle market. He started out his career as an investment banking analyst at Wachovia Securities and Credit Suisse First Boston. And he is a Georgetown U and Wharton School alum. He's originally from Taiwan, but he grew up outside of Syracuse, New York. So thank you so much, Borden. And I'll allow him to introduce our speaker today, Miss Netta.
Thanks a lot, Kit and Andrew and all the AIM organization for putting on this great event. Appreciation for all the participants, right? Everyone's got busy work days, and carve out an hour to hopefully learn something positive is, kudos to you. So as Kim mentioned, through all the different positions I've had, right? I've been in the industry over 20 years. And over this time, I've seen a great increase in diversity, right? In the faces I see in the meetings and the boardrooms. And that's been a huge positive for our industry. We're not quite there yet, but it's definitely a positive step forward. However, with that, you have organizations with people from different backgrounds, different cultures, and there are sometimes kind of ways that you can navigate either successfully or unsuccessfully through these environments. So we're very fortunate today to have Netta Kalantari with us. She's an executive coach, and we're here for the fireside chat to talk about how to be successful work in these environments. So with that, Netta, do you want to give your background?
Thank you so much, Borden. Fantastic introduction. Excited about today. Welcome, everyone. Thank you, first and foremost, for sharing your hour with us. We want to make it as impactful and just leave it there, as impactful as possible for you. My name is Netta Kalantari. I am an executive coach and consultant. My family is originally from Iran. I was born in New York. I have lived in Mexico. I went to a British school. We moved to Moscow. I've been in Boston, and now I am in New York. With that, I grew to love learning about cultures and languages and how these things affect the workplace, specifically in a world where we are becoming more global and more interconnected. Culture has never really mattered more in the professional environment. So I'm really excited to be here today. I work with individuals and organizations. Please, I'll remind you at the end as well, but feel free to add me on LinkedIn. I'd love to stay in touch and see if your learnings today were able to help you in the future.
So Netta, maybe to start off, right? You work with a lot of clients. What have you heard or seen recently from your clients in terms of trends in diversity? And is this an area they've asked more and more about recently?
It absolutely is, Borden. As you had mentioned, we are slowly but surely seeing more and more diversity across all industries and in all workplaces. And companies now are also just becoming more global with the use of social media and pandemic really showing people that they could be working from home or working remotely. We're seeing companies grow in diversity in their global footprint. But with that, one of the trends we're seeing is a lot of cultural differences that are coming up and the conflicts that those can cause when there's miscommunication, misunderstanding, differences in hierarchy or being direct versus indirect. So one of the things that I'm definitely seeing is both clients and organizations coming to me from the organization side, really asking how they can better their culture and be a more cohesive global organization. And from the individuals, they're really looking to figure out how to work in this new environment. Some of them have moved to different cities, countries, regions, and they're finding that they're rubbing up against a lot of issues in the workplace that seem personal, but they really just come down to professional differences because of culture. So I work on that a lot with my clients.
For the individual clients, right? As you think about your conversations, your work, what are a few of the kind of top tips that you discuss with them?
I'll give you tips for the individuals, and then we can move to tips for the organizations and specifically those in leadership positions, because I know we have a few of those in the chat today. So on the more personal individual level, regardless of your status in the company, it doesn't matter if you're junior, senior, leader, CEO, irrelevant. One of the most important things that I've come across in my professional lifetime is that when someone is of a second language, for the purposes of this chat, let's call it second language English, it benefits you to speak as slowly and almost simply as you possibly can. It does not mean to demean the person or speak to them as if they are a baby or less intelligent. But I know, for example, I'm from New York in a sense. And in New York City, we speak very fast. My own father, who is Persian, but who is second language English, has often told me, Netta, I didn't understand a thing you just said. Please slow down. So first and foremost, speaking slowly, I think paraphrasing back what someone has said to you in the workplace, regardless of language barriers, honestly, is always a great idea. And you just basically say, like, so let me understand this correctly. You want me to run the report from Q1 of 2022 and aggregate the data in this format and send it to Susan so that she can X, Y, Z. That allows like the person you're talking to know that you understood, correct you if you didn't, and prevent you from doing incorrect work. So paraphrasing is huge, listening. And most importantly, if someone is not a first language that you are, to not finish their sentence, allow them to finish the sentence. I remember once I was at a media company helping them with a mentorship program, and I saw someone who was first language English approach a new hire who was second language English. Great intention. He was asking, like, how's everything going? How are you fitting in here? And she said, I'm just so, and she was trying to find the words, and he was saying frustrated, overwhelmed, buried in work. And she was like, and you could tell that now she was starting to get frustrated and overwhelmed. And she was like, no, and she just kept going like this. And then she ended up saying, grateful. I'm so grateful to be here. I'm so grateful for this opportunity, for the visa that was extended to me. He was probably talking about how he feels at work. And oftentimes you'll find that when you're trying to finish people's sentences, it could really be going in a completely different direction. So please give people their space to talk. And I hope you receive yours as well. Also, a big thing that I talk about with my clients is perspective over perception as much as possible. Perception is, how am I experiencing this? Versus perspective is understanding where that person comes from. I have a client who's a doctor in several ER units all over the world. And he began to realize that as a Middle Eastern man, he can be very long-winded. And he was feeling that he wasn't getting the promotions he deserved. His perception was that people are not listening to me. But when he really gave it time and self-reflection, he began to realize the perspective is that I need to be more succinct. So try to operate with perspective over perception as much as you can, and really try to meet people where they are to understand that it is very oftentimes not a personal disagreement. It's more than not a misunderstanding, probably rooted in culture.
Thinking about just organizations, and at least when I think about places where I felt like everyone functioned at their best, they're places where the environment, there's a lot of personal connection within with the colleagues, right? Everyone feels very comfortable in their own skin, and as a result, not surprisingly, everyone performs at their best. However, if your background is different from the majority of your colleagues, I know it's not always easy, right, to share your background and make that connection. So from a, culture bridging and making that personal connection standpoint, any advice for folks, like myself, where, my first job, no one really had my background, and it took me a little while to connect with my colleagues.
I'm sure you'll begin to empathize with what I'm about to say. To your point, Borden, sharing and having personal connections in the workplace is vital. Yes, it is work, and there are certain lines that maybe we don't cross in the personal lives of others. However, work is truly where we spend the majority of our time. We are at work more than we are with our families, more than we see our friends, oftentimes more than we're sleeping. So it's important to have these personal connections at work. Human beings are a very social species. So to your point, though it is vital to have these personal connections, oftentimes sharing personal information or your background can be very daunting, especially for individuals from diverse or underrepresented backgrounds. So I start with a few things. First and foremost, so easy, start with shared interests. And these can be interests that are work related, like, wow, I love an Excel spreadsheet. Or these can be interests that are completely extracurricular, like sports. I have seen all over the world people in all different industries bond over their love for sports, food, fashion, whatever it may be. I'm sure you have a shared interest with someone. You may have different opinions, but you could have a shared interest in the same topic. Small steps, small shares is something I tell my clients a lot. This is what will build trust over time. You have small, relatable shares at the beginning that give people an idea of who you are, or how you move, or what your preferences are, and that builds trust to then allow for larger, more personal shares as time goes on, if you wish. Creating safe spaces is a huge one. We've seen this with a lot of organizations. There is a huge boom in ERGs and affinity groups. Safe spaces don't have to be that formal. It's simply making a space that is safe for people to share with you. So this could be informal gatherings, like let's all meet for a drink or a bite after work. It could be team building activities that are more formal, on or off property. It could be diversity focused events, such as this one. One thing I always like to stress is that appeasement is not connection. So if you are creating these safe spaces to have these small shares and find these mutual interests, just trying to appease everyone or show how similar you are to someone does not a connection make. It's actually the differences is where we find some of our connections the most, and especially if there's an issue. I remember once I was group coaching an executive team, and it was 2 Brits, a French woman, an American man, and a Bermudian man. And the French woman shared that she didn't feel like when Brits say, "How are you?" they really mean it. This enraged one of the Brits in the room, and he made it be known. And they had a respectful, but somewhat tenuous dialogue about it. And it got resolved. But if he hadn't said anything and he had bit his lip and not explained to her why Brits do that or how they ask that question or what they really mean or the greater context, she would still feel like they don't really mean it when they say, "How are you?" So I cannot stress enough, appeasement is not connection. You can have mutual interests and have differing opinions on them. The goal is not for everyone to be the same. The goal is to find something that you share. An example of all of those that I'll quickly share is an executive. He was my father, actually. He was the president for a large American corporation in Latin America. And he realized that, few things about Latins. They love football, soccer. They love to joke around. And sometimes their definition of being on time can be a little different than the definition of someone from New York being on time. He noticed that every week in the weekly executive call for all the presidents of the different South American countries, people were coming in 5, 10, sometimes 15 minutes late. They liked to joke around and then they would get into the conversation. So one, he allowed the first 10 minutes of every hour weekly meeting to be about football and jokes about their mothers and whatever it was that they were doing before him, recognizing that these people have a life of their own. They have a practice of their own. And if I am to lead them, I need to assimilate and also let them be who they are, because that's what got this company to where it is. So he wasn't trying to bring in his whole American, we don't talk about sports in a work call. He allowed them a designated safe space time of 10 minutes to talk about football and insult one another and do whatever they wanted in a jokey way. Also, for the timeliness of it, he implemented a rule where for every minute you were late, you would have to contribute $10 to the company fund that then went to the company holiday party at the end of every year. This made sure that everyone was on time. It made it fun. And even if they weren't on time, there was some kind of good thing that came out of it a little bit later. So just like fully embracing.
There are a lot of points that resonated with me as I think about my career. I would say that the three things that stood out as you were talking and took down some notes is one, the sports, right? And my first job was in Charlotte, North Carolina. So I'd never been there before, and golf was pretty big, fishing was pretty big, and during orientation, when they have the analysts meet with some of the more senior folks, I didn't really have that much in common because I didn't do either of those activities. But over time, I love sports, I love basketball, and through that, as you articulately put it, the small shares, we got to know each other more and more. And that for me, just as your example, really helped. And I think kind of your point on not appeasing. For me, I think about it a little bit differently, right? And I think of it more as, if you're genuine and if you're authentic and your colleagues know it, if you raise something, even if it's not in agreement with them, or you raise something that may not seem initially in your mind, a positive, or may potentially create conflict. If you're authentic, they know that, you're not trying to do something that's, hurtful or harmful. And in your example, they resolved it. So I do think having that mindset would be very helpful, and to create an open dialogue and to prevent conflicts going forward.
And I say this to my clients all the time, authenticity wins. It will always win. If you show up as who you are and speak genuinely from who you are and what your beliefs are in a way that is respectful of others, but with respect to who you authentically are, very few times can anything go wrong. And if something goes wrong, if the truth breaks it, it deserves to be broken. If you're not able to be your authentic self somewhere, it doesn't really sound like it's the place for you.
Right. So thinking about, you mentioned earlier communication, different styles. And, look, I think culturally, right, there's definitely influences on how we all communicate based on our background, based on our culture. But I've also found that, communication is a skill, right? Just because culturally, maybe you weren't brought up to communicate directly doesn't
Mhm,
mean you can't do it, right? Is
mhm.
that something you agree with? Is this something, maybe you and your clients have worked on previously, and maybe share some of your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I mean, humans are an adaptable species. It's how we made it this far. I mean, by a certain extent, all species are adaptable, but we've seen it in our lifetime. I'm pretty sure I can't see everyone in the chat, but given that we're all professionals, I think the majority of us will all remember the introduction of the internet. We definitely all remember the introduction of the smartphone. We are adaptable, sometimes in a really scary way, to the point that you can't remember how you did something before you adapted. And adapting in a work environment is par for the course. You have to learn and adapt to what is going on in your new workplace in a way that's authentic to you, yes, but ultimately you are working for a larger company that has perhaps its own ethos. And making sure that that's aligned at the beginning is really going to be your responsibility. So once you get in, learning how to adapt to their communication styles, how direct they may be, that's a big one. A lot of us come from cultures that aren't so direct. We really live in the gray with the way we speak. And that's speaking for a lot of cultures in the entire continent of Asia, from the West to the Far East, from the North to the South. We're a big contextual people. That's something we all really have in common, versus more individualistic countries like America that we're in now. And learning to adapt to that and learning the communication styles are only to your benefit and to decrease your frustration. So simple things like, or not simple, but learning how to reframe a situation for yourself. I know, Borden, you and I had mentioned, talking, like, sometimes people from Asia or, these types of places, like these cultures, they don't always feel so entitled to ask for raises or promotions. But you oftentimes find that if you don't on this side of the world, you don't receive them. And being able to reframe it for yourself, like, I'm not asking for more money, technically. I'm asking for money that matches the value that I'm bringing to this organization. These small but very important reframes are going to be pivotal for you to learn better communication styles. Something I always like to encourage my clients to do as well is seek feedback. We are a social species. We rely, they always say, like, it takes a village. That's because that's how human society was established. It was around the campfire, and there were 50 people who were all responsible for doing something for this community. So seek feedback from your community. Who is a trusted colleague or a mentor or a career coach, such as myself, that can give serious feedback on your communication style? I always prefer to real play instead of role play. So I will real play with my clients a lot. Give me a certain situation that you are dealing with now that you don't know how to deal with, and let's talk it through. Let's have a real play of how that conversation would go so that you can practice it a few times. I can give you feedback on how to be more direct, less direct, when to push, and all of this in a safe environment. So I think these things are going to be really important for learning how to adapt your communication style. Because to your earlier question, yes, I do think it's possible, but I know it's possible. I've seen it. I actually have a client of mine who works for one of the largest firm in the world, and they are in London. She's an American, and by all, measures, she's probably like white passing. She's a Jewish American from New York, and she's moved to London. New Yorkers, Americans, specifically Jewish American New Yorkers, are very direct people. They're very blunt. It's how they know to be. It's what they value. They actually don't like it if you're not so blunt because they feel that maybe you're hiding something or you're being tricksy. So she has now gone to Britain, which is much more passive in the way they speak to people. And her higher ups have told her that the way you're speaking to your direct report is inappropriate. What you should be doing when she drops off a project that is not correct or to your standards, you say, well, that was a great shot. Maybe one thing I would perhaps suggest, if you wanted, next time, possibly you could. It's so passive. She, she gets it dropped in front of her and she's like, that's not right. Let me show you how it's wrong. And let me show you what I meant. Go do it again. No one's wrong and no one's really right either. And I was incredulous to find that this large firm had no training, no cultural training, even though they have all these different offices all over the world. And this is surely a problem that they've run into multiple times. She has stressed to her corporation many times, I would like a British career coach to train me in communication styles. And maybe the organization isn't always going to have it for you, but surely those resources are there, especially in our modern world. So I encourage you to use them. Also, I'll raise my hand. I'm always here for you as well.
That's great. I mean, look, I think the reframing is definitely something I've used, right, in my career, and it's helped. I would say it's definitely not easy. It's still not easy, but reframing it, talking out with someone, and I found that it's been helpful talking to folks that maybe not know the situation. They're a little bit higher level so that they come in with a fresh perspective. And for me personally, that's been very helpful. And a couple other perspectives that maybe motivate others to do the same is that, look, especially promotion, raises, if you're not going to do it, your colleagues are doing it. When I'm hiring for CEOs or executive positions in our portfolio companies, when we make an offer, I would say most of the seasoned professionals, they would come back with a counter offer. It's actually the ones that accept everything we give them on the first try or first offer. We actually get a little bit suspicious in terms of, is there something that we're missing here, or is the situation they're leaving not as they describe? So look, to tie it all up, when you're asking for these things, the worst they could say is no. And that's not the worst thing in the world.
Do you remember something that you reframed for yourself that you could share?
As I think about just getting promoted, right, and titles, the firms I worked in, at least internally, the titles don't matter all that much. But look, having promotion shows progression, shows that you're taking on more responsibility. But then as I think about it, there's a lot of marketing and sourcing, right? And having a title bump would be very helpful for that. So
Absolutely.
that doesn't only accrete the value, the benefit doesn't only accrete to me, it accretes to a firm. So if I'm already doing these higher level responsibilities and I could do more, and if the external world, right, sees that with the title bump, it helps everyone. So that really helped it pretty easily just to explain it. And it was very well received. But I think if I only thought like, all right, I'm asking for this title just for myself, then it's a little bit different conversation.
And you applied a larger industry context to it, right? Maybe in this firm, the title doesn't matter so much, but in the larger context, that title could give me a leg up as I move around firms, as I ask for larger paychecks when I move around firms. And also, if in this firm it doesn't matter that much, then it shouldn't be that big of an ask.
DEI, diversity, all this has been, I would say, relative to kind of the longer timeline, still pretty new, right? So there's been a lot of new terminologies. I profess that I'm probably not up to speed on all the new terminology. So what would you suggest for someone who may not be kind of day in, day out, understanding what's the latest terminology, how would you advise them towards having these types of conversations?
Absolutely. I was actually just talking with my client today about an essay that really changed my life by a Polish author. And it was The Power of I Don't Know. So we've all seen it before when someone asks another person, like, oh, have you heard of this band? Or have you, do you know this movie? And the person goes, yeah, they did it. And we all know that they didn't. They know that they don't know it. I know that they don't know it. Everyone who witnessed this interaction knows that they don't know it. And the person who asked them knows that they don't know it. What's worse is when you are preserving your ego to say, yeah, I know that, instead of being like, no, I don't know. You didn't walk away having gained anything. You didn't walk away having learned anything. You actually walked away probably having lost some respect. Versus I don't know has been scientifically proven to build trust, specifically in the workplace between a senior and their direct report. When a senior hears a junior say, I don't know, it actually does build trust in the brain, and it's been proven. And the power of I don't know is an incredible thing, because you own it, and it's a safe space, and you're like, no, I don't know about that. Teach me, tell me more, show me. And that allows for deeper trust to be built, open communication, for someone to see that you're honest and you're not fake or something like that. You walk away having learned something. You walk away having gained knowledge, respect, trust. You just added a mosaic piece, like tile, to your huge mosaic of knowledge. And that's a beautiful thing. So one thing I always want to encourage is the continuous learning, saying I don't know and being comfortable with that phrase. Also, just learning as a whole, staying informed, reading articles, attending workshops and webinars that are about diversity, like all of you are doing today. This is oftentimes how you stay up to date with the latest terminologies. Terminologies are changing all the time. I know that I don't know them all, and I'm not always up to date with them all. But I ask questions, and I encourage you to too. Most people appreciate the effort to learn and understand, and the intent to be respectful and inclusive always speaks louder than perfect terminology. Saying something like, was that the correct way to say it? Or maybe this isn't the correct way, but I know it as X. Or allowing people to correct you without having your ego bruised. On that note, my own mother, who, we are from Iran and she identifies as Asian. We are West Asian. She's obviously from a different generation. And there's no offense in it when she says it, but she really can't keep up, and with all the latest terminologies. And oftentimes when she is talking about someone from the Far East of Asia, she still refers to them sometimes as Oriental. I do not embarrass her in public. I do not, call her out when we're in front of people or interject in her conversation. But every single time she does it, I pull her to the side afterwards very quickly, and I say, you can't say that anymore. You're supposed to say Asian. She's always confused. She's like, but I'm Asian. I get it. To them, Asian is this, and you have to say that, or else you will be perceived as someone who you can fill in the blanks. Same thing happened when she didn't understand the all lives matter. She thought they were talking about Black lives when she said all lives matter. So I had to politely, privately, quickly correct her. And that's something that happens when you build trust. So don't be afraid to correct people, and don't ever be afraid to have people correct you, because you always gain. You truly don't lose. We just have so many resources now too. So if you're going to be entering a room of people that you realize, I don't know if I'm up to date with the latest terminology around this group of people, please, we have HR departments, we have diversity councils, we have AI, we have online glossaries. Please use all the tools, because we have truly never had such incredible access to so much information. So don't ever let your ego come before learning.
Right. So, I think we all agree that, multicultural, diverse organizations are here to stay. And we all hope that the diversity increases over time. And this is kind of the workplace that we're all in right now. So maybe to sum it up before Q&A, what are 2 or 3 kind of success factors or characteristics that you see from your clients that do this really well?
Authentic and transparent communication. Cannot stress enough. I have a client who he runs a huge healthcare industry, and he holds, I believe they're quarterly town hall meetings where all the leaders of all of his departments come together in person, and they discuss diversity goals, progress, fostering transparency, and trust. So these open dialogues, these open, transparent communication channels, nothing can happen without them, truly. Inclusive leadership. It's really important to be able to see someone who looks like you in a leadership position. And I know we're all suffering from that. It's not at the level that we want it to be at yet. And unfortunately, a report just came out that diversity positions are down 44% this year. So we're seeing companies even invest less in all these diversity initiatives. So I urge you, push back, have your voices be heard. My husband is a Black Caribbean, and he works at a huge ad tech firm. He's been there for 11 years. And every single year, at every opportunity, when it's the ask the CEO anything and the all hands, he has always asked, why does our entire executive team look the same? When will there be more diversity in the executive team? As one of very few Black males in this firm, when can I expect to see someone who looks more like me in the executive team? And he's not pushing anything, right? Like, they once created a different group, created an entire memorandum saying, like, which one of you white men is going to give up your chair? And he was like, a Black person did not write this. I am not asking for anyone to give up their chair. Everyone deserves the chair that they got. I choose to believe that. But other people also deserve a chair. And it would behoove us to give them that chair, because we've seen it time and time again. Performance levels are always higher with a diverse team. And I also encourage mentorship programs. I worked with a multi-million-dollar music label, and she has offices all over the world, in London, New York, Nashville, LA, and Dubai. All of these places are very, very different. And they ran a very flat company. But as the company grew, she started realizing that the juniors were saying they didn't know how to level up. They didn't know who they could count on. They didn't know who they should follow. So I helped her implement a mentorship program where we teamed senior leaders from one office with a junior or a few junior employees that they best matched with from other offices. This created increased cohesion, better communication, deeper understanding of cultural differences, and also just industry specific. They started to learn more about what was happening in the music world in that part of the world, that even though their company was handling it, it became so siloed that no one had any idea. So it just allowed for the whole company to really be a better hive than like a flatland. And then, I can't stress enough, continuous education. Go to networking events, join webinars, read articles, go to workshops, host your own. It is so important to talk to people who do not look and speak and come from the same place you do. It is the only way we grow. And I again urge you, say that to your leaders, push for that change, because the only reason we saw all those DEI initiatives was because of that open dialogue that we were having. And then lastly, metrics. We're data people. Numbers don't lie. There needs to be some form of regular assessments that are taken to make sure that the program is working that you implemented. Maybe there are necessary adjustments that need to be made, but you can't just do something one time and say, well, that's it. That was our DEI initiative. There needs to be consistent regulated assessments of the metrics and measurements. And there are incredible AI tools for that now, like Scanta, that give companies data in real time about how their DEI initiatives are working and the cohesion levels of the company.
I think that's a nice list of both kind of individual and organizational actions that people can take to be helpful. Look, I think, one, again, it's probably going to reframe, right? Like everyone should think about, people are recognizing more and more that having a diverse background, having different perspectives, right? That's beneficial, that's of value. So I encourage everyone, right? Don't be afraid to share your perspective, right? I know it may not be easy, right? And maybe a little bit scary for some of the younger folks, but the more you do it, that's where your value comes in. And I know we talked a lot about sharing, but on the other aspect is not everyone is gonna come up to you and ask you to share your background, right? So why not be proactive and try to learn about their background? And that's one way to engage someone. And it'll turn into a two-way dialogue. The last thing I'll just say before Q&A is look, this is not easy. You got to work at it. Right. And I guess it's natural to not feel comfortable, but when you're not comfortable, that's where you grow. That's at least how I've grown through the years. It may seem something big and something that's hasn't been done before, but trust me, it's been done before. There's a lot of us. We all been in these situations. Other people have dealt with these situations. So don't be afraid, and hope everyone takes something very successful and useful out of this. And with that, maybe I'll turn over to Kit to see if there are any questions.
We do have one question here. It says, how do you deal with the feeling of not fitting in culturally and the confidence dent that it creates? So this question is about confidence. Then the next question, which you somewhat addressed earlier, but maybe if you have further thoughts on it, the second question is, for example, how do you connect beyond the first level conversations, such as, how are you? How was your weekend? So there's a question of confidence, and then like you were talking about earlier, building trust.
I think the small shares that find mutual interest are going to be how you build confidence, because there is something that we have in common with anyone and everyone. And like I said, and to Borden's point, he went down to the South and he was into sports and they were into sports, but they were going fishing and he's playing basketball. But it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, an athlete's mind is wired very similarly, regardless of what sport they're playing. So I encourage you to always seek first the common, and then the beauty of the differences comes after that. And if you can build that foundation of trust with, oh, like, I don't know where that is. I don't know who that is. Why do you like them? To Borden's point, ask people questions. People love to talk about themselves. If you ask someone questions about themselves, 90% of the time they walk away from the conversation thinking it was a great one, and they don't even know why. But it's because you felt invested and interested in that. And you'll see who starts asking you questions back or who just answers the questions you ask. And I think a big part of confidence is about finding your people. So that's a good way to start.
Yeah, and a couple other points on just confidence, right? So one, you are at this firm because they know you could do the job, and you're still there because you've been doing the job. So one way is just kind of break it down very unemotionally, say, look, I should be confident because I could do X, Y, and Z well, right? So I'm here just like everyone else. And then two, thinking about the personal connection, again, I would try to start small, right? Talk to folks, after a call, right? For a few minutes, or approach someone, try to grab coffee, or maybe you say, hey, I'm gonna get coffee. Do you want something? These little things, they'll start building up more and more. And you know, before you know it, it's part of your daily routine to have these kind of smaller chats with folks, and they get to know you and you get to know them.
Like, how do you move past how are you, how was your weekend? I also think being realistic with what most work conversations are is going to help you not get disappointed. Disappointment is just unmet expectations. Please expect that on a Monday everyone's just going to ask, how's your weekend? It's the only thing everyone talks about. When it rains, everyone's like, wow, it's raining today. Like, yes, we know. So also be kind to yourself and to others in this process. It takes time.
So the next question is, what are the best skills to grow or master in order to become more adaptable so that I can come across in a more welcoming way for others to talk to?
Continuous learning, communication. I love mentorship programs. So I think having not even just one, if you can find a few mentors, that's always great. Find people who you would hope to emulate. Find people who are in positions that you would want to be in. Ask them about their story. Ask them about what their success strategies were and what wasn't successful. It's always best to try and learn from someone else's pitfalls than have your own whenever you can. And I just think staying up to date, like we said, reading the articles, joining the workshops, not getting sucked into the social media world or anything like that, but touching upon social media because that's the age in which we live. And there is a lot of pertinent information on there as well. And I think these things will help you stay adaptable. Also, you're probably way more adaptable than you're giving yourself credit for. I would encourage you to think of all the situations that you started where you knew nothing or you knew no one, when you moved, when you started school, when you chose your major, when you started a firm, when you went into your first apartment, when you had to pay your own bills. These things, you'll realize that you're way more adaptable than you think.
The question about being a little bit more welcoming, I would say think about just really asking questions and think about what you want to learn about the other person or the people that you're engaging with. Because one of the things that I love about my job is I get to meet people from all walks of life, different companies, different industries, different places. And I generally love hearing about their stories. And, when you have a first meeting, I really just want to get to know them, right? Because there are a lot of interesting, a lot of amazing stories, and don't be afraid to ask these questions, right? So I think thinking about, what you want to learn from someone when you meet them and asking the questions will definitely help you become a lot more welcome because the counterparty is like, wow, they really want to learn about me and they'll engage. I would say most people will definitely engage.
Just to plug, if anyone didn't know, Borden actually has a podcast episode that you can listen to online. So if you want to hear a little bit about Borden's story, then tune into that. So we have another question, and then I see that there's a question actually directed to each of you individually. So the first question, I'll try to do this justice because it's very faceted. So it says, in asset management, many reasons determine whether a team will be a winning team, such as when they entered the market, AUM, etc. In many winning teams, the people are not diverse or open-minded, and being open-minded doesn't really move the needle for P&L in a meaningful way. Aside from moving to weaker platforms, there must be a way to unlock opportunities in these settings. It sounds like maybe this person is asking about what if your perspective maybe isn't being valued or isn't moving the needle in a significant way for P&L.
In the finance industry, right? It's very capitalistic, right? People want to make money. And, if you have a good argument with good support, I find that most people will listen. I kind of relate it to sports. When you get between the lines, people don't really care what you look like, right? As long as you can perform. So I would, if you find that people aren't receptive to your ideas or perspectives, one, if there's someone you could talk to see if there's anything more than what you're feeling. But two, I would maybe ask for some feedback on how you're constructing your arguments, right? At least in the finance industry and what we do, right? We're asking folks to invest large sums of dollars, right, into certain companies. And, it's got to be a very compelling argument. You can't just say, look, I think this industry is great. I found this company. Let's put some money to it. You got to really think it out and be able to answer people's questions. And that's a tough skill. And you have to think about the dynamics. If you don't have enough time to present your ideas, how can you kind of make an elevator pitch? But I would start by talking to other folks to get their perspective to see why things aren't getting through, and then think about how you can improve your arguments and pitch to the team.
And the only thing I'll add to that is through doing what Gordon's saying, you will make your own personal relationships with that. Sometimes when everyone gets together as a team, it can be hard to introduce yourself or show who you personally are. But the one-on-one time that you could have with those team members to then get your values across in an appropriate way and at an appropriate time, that's sometimes where the connection is made. But I would also encourage you to just remember the bottom line, what the bottom line is of a company, what the bottom line is of a project, and try and assimilate that way using those values.
This first question for Borden: what considerations do you give to, quote, DEI factors in your investment decisions? Are there examples of active engagements with issuers on this topic? And then Netta, your question is, from your perspective, what are possible reasons why diversity hiring is 40% down?
Yes, we don't call it DEI, we call it ESG, where there are different parameters that we go through for our investment decisions. And also, given that I'm on the private equity side, a lot of times we have control over our companies. So for example, when I'm hiring for a CEO, right, I would ask the recruiters, right, to be very broad in their outreach, right, in terms of backgrounds of candidates. And then at the end of the search, we would take a look at kind of some of the stats in terms of who were the how many minority candidates did the recruiter reach out to? How many did we interview? How many women candidates did we talk to? And then we kind of review that for every single search to make sure that we're giving everyone a fair shake, and that we are trying to find the best candidates possible across all backgrounds. So those are a couple quick examples of how we incorporate that into our investments and investment process.
From my perspective, what are possible reasons why diversity hiring is down 44%? In some, a lack of investment from a lot of organizations. I think there was a moment during the pandemic where we were applying a lot of pressure, and granted, we had more time to do so. People were able to march because they weren't in an office, for example. And there was this pressure cooker where companies were really being faced with people dropping out and boycotting and not working for them. And so they began to invest in these DEI initiatives. To be fair to both sides, I think sometimes a lot of organizations moved a little too fast before they really understood how the best way was to go about this. A lot of HR professionals got pushed into a title of people or culture. And these really are different things. And we have to respect that they are different things. A director of people is truly so different to a director of HR. diversity is so different. You know, HR can deal with hiring and firing and layoffs and benefits and so much more than just diversity. And diversity in itself has so many subsections. So like developing ERGs and allowing them, you know, granting them funding to be able to put on events that are in and outside of the office that people actually want to attend and learn. To be fair as well, the reason some of these roles are down is because they got filled. I think there was a moment where, you know, director of people or DEI officer, these titles did not exist like 5 years ago. So I think there was a rush to open them up and a rush to fill them, and they got filled. And so now there's just less to fill, which I think we have to also be honest about.
Thank you so much, Netta and Borden. Thank you to Beach Point Capital for making this possible.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.